Hello, I'm here from the Ivy Tech Indianapolis campus library, and I am here to talk today about the process in finding sources during the research process. We are presenting to an English 111 class, a popular topic that I oftentimes see when I am speaking to students here. And this one is, how is technology changing us? And we're starting at the stage where, your teacher has just let you know that you are going to be writing a big paper, like an ambitious paper with multiple sources, and or you'll be giving a presentation that requires research. Or in other words, finding information that you have to find yourself that you're looking for, also known as research. And so it is my pleasure to hopefully make this an easier process for you and to explain some of the questions you might be having about how to do it or where to start. And so, stick with me for about an hour and I'll show you what we do around here. So for starters, before we get too into it, I'll go ahead and let you know what our learning objectives are today. And one of them is to find information from appropriate sources. So you need to find some information, you need to find sources, and you also need to find them in specific places. So not only am I going to show you where to find sources, but I'm also going to show you what type of information in the source or in that document that will be useful to you as you develop your paper. We are going to be talking about databases and places that are often the places where we look for this information. So we'll be looking for sources within databases, and those databases that we'll be highlighting will be the ones that are found on the Ivy Tech Indianapolis library site. And then we'll also be addressing the keyword search and how to find keywords and how to choose keywords that will tie to your research topic and help you find appropriate information. So that's what I intend to do today. And so our agenda, what we're going to cover is we are going to be talking about how to access the library. Where is it? What can be found on our library site? And what will be most useful for you? We'll be talking about academic tutoring. We offer academic tutoring here at Ivy Tech completely for free. And you can get tutoring in writing. You can get it in math and science. You can get it in IT. You can get it in life sciences. We offer a number of different places that you can, or different types of tutoring through our library system. We have database searching that I intend on demonstrating for you and showing you where to go and how to use those databases to get exactly what you need. And then we will be talking about research source discovery, or in other words, finding these sources that will support your thoughts and support your thesis that you develop during this preliminary part before you start doing the research. So we're going to cover a lot during this demonstration, and we'll go ahead and get started. So let's go ahead and start with this, the question or the manner that oftentimes these big, a project is started for a student or a group of students in a class. A lot of times an instructor will deliberately be choosing different types of readings that correspond with a theme or a topic that they want you to know more about during the time that you're in class with everyone else in there. For English 111, sometimes it's a Psych 101, sometimes it's a COM. There's all kinds of reasons, all types of classes you might be doing this. But a lot of times the teacher will say, you need to choose a topic within this bigger topic that we've been discussing for the last couple of months. And I want you to find something smaller within that bigger topic because this big topic is very big and you need to find something that's more manageable. And so this, I feel, is always an appropriate place to start when we're talking about research. Like, what are we looking for? Because we have to look for something or know what we're looking for before we can start looking, You can't just, I mean, you can just drive your car, but a lot of times it has a destination. And so that's what we're setting up now. So if technology is changing us, if that's what your teacher told you, or that's what the topic is, what they want next, and I'm sure they break this down for you, but they want you to find something smaller that ties to this bigger topic. And a lot of times a student will need to do a little bit of brainstorming and preparation before they are ready to jump into that research and to do the other important parts of the paper writing. And so, where we're going to start today is we're actually going to start on my Ivy. And so, when we're at my Ivy is where I oftentimes direct all students to get started or to find the library for the first time before you end up bookmarking in it or favoriting it in my Ivy. And so, where I usually tell people to look for the library site is to either go to the See All tab, where all of the apps are alphabetized, and it's a good place to where you'll find both library and statewide. You can also go up here to the search bar up in the top left-hand corner and type in library. And you'll end up having two options, library with nothing beside it, and then library statewide. What you want to do is click on library with nothing beside it, because that then will take you to the Ivy Tech Indianapolis library site. So this library site is specifically made for the library at Indianapolis. And on this site, we have good information that could help you for this assignment and for the future. As we go clockwise, one of the things you'll see is the date. You'll also see the hours that we are open. And you'll see information about chat hours if we have them. And then you can always click here to know where we are located. Next, we have two different options for tutoring. You can have a tutor who is a librarian who can do everything I'm talking about today, except one-on-one with you in person or virtually. And then there's also a place where you can go to connect with the other tutors that I mentioned. So the math and science, the writing, the IT, the life sciences, all of those can be accessed through looking at one of these tabs. You may also check out study rooms. We have a couple study rooms right now where students can check out their space for up to 3 hours, either alone or with a group. So that is always something that you are welcome to do, and for free, again. As we move down, we always try to feature a database that might be used at our, that you might want to explore a little bit further. We have a lot of specialized databases that might be more useful to others depending on your track. Next, we have statewide workshops and events. These are held every 8 weeks. So when classes are in session, the statewide library team is also giving out instruction and giving direction on how to do certain assignments and certain academic tasks that you're expected to do when you're in school. Then you scroll down a little bit further. Down here, you see a banner that lists our contact information once again. So if you ever forget, that's always a place to go. You could call us. You can also email us. And then as we move forward or up around the clock, we have two different areas that you can get resources or where we have databases. So one way to get to our databases is through A to Z resources. So if you click here, what you'll see is that we have 134 databases that you can click into one by one by one by one until the end. You can also look for databases by going into types. So we can go into types to find them. And so they can be filtered this way in terms of types of databases. And then we also have specialized databases found under our subjects tab. So that can be found under A to Z resources. And then we also like to do searches and start with Discover. So one of the things that we like about Start with Discover is that instead of going through one by one with databases, in Start with Discover, you're looking at nearly all of them at one time. So tying that to the question of how is technology changing us and making that into a smaller place or smaller topic that you can write a 5 to 12 page paper over, we oftentimes try to steer students who are in the brainstorming stage to opposing viewpoints. Opposing viewpoints can be found underneath A to Z resources. It can also be found if you click into A to Z resources, you can always go over to the O's. And if you go to O, you scroll down, we'll find opposing viewpoints and context alphabetized right here. You can also go to types, and right up here at the top, we have argumentative research. So if you click here and then go to filter databases, we have 3 that you might consider, especially if you are presenting an argumentative research paper. And these are different places you could go. We'll be talking about opposing viewpoints and context, but I do know instructors who like the other 2 as well. So we'll focus on the opposing viewpoints and context, and we'll click right here. Now, once you get into opposing viewpoints, this is a different type of database compared to the ones that we'll be talking about later, where it is required that you do a keyword search. This is more of a click around the site kind of database, but it definitely has its benefits. One being that it is robust in terms of information. So there's a couple places that you can go to search for more information about your topic or to narrow it down based after you've heard what your teacher expects of the class. And we'll actually start down here. If you look here, it says browse all 492 topics. If you click on this, this is going to take you to nearly 500 different topics that you might want to know more about. And this is quite an impressive list of options, in my opinion. We have topics such as ownership of exotic animals, patriotism, peer pressure, e-cigarettes and vapor products, e-waste, pollution, politics and religion, politics and media, political polling, executive powers, extreme weather. Anything you choose might be something that you want to talk about further. Not all of them are going to be related to technology. So do look at this, use some discretion when you're looking at your options. But all of these are going to be designed in a certain way. If we clicked on road rage right here, what every single topic has is a read overview. It also shows related topics. So different topics that may not be this topic, but that are tied to it. So distracted driving, drunk driving, guns and violence, self-defense laws, okay? And then they'll show you different types of sources and different articles that have been written about them. So no matter what topic I look at, whether it's road rage, right to bear arms, or foster care, it's always going to be laid out in that kind of way. So that's one way to get into opposing viewpoints. Another way that you could find your topic is by looking at these issues as they are grouped together. One that I really like with this, is technology changing us question, is the science, technology, and ethics. Now, as opposed to 492 topics, we have 119. And these are all ones that I would encourage you to consider if you have no idea what you're already looking for. If you do know what you're looking for, then you also do want to look for that, because I'm always surprised by what I see in terms of the offerings. And so I know in both this model, this example, and in the case of when I am, both at work and personally, I have found myself more and more fascinated with the topic of artificial intelligence. And I think that this will still be a pretty important topic for a few years to come. So when I look over here to the left and I see artificial intelligence with nothing beside it, then artificial intelligence and mental health, I know that those are two options that I might want to look at more closely. But don't forget, at any point, I could look at anything else and see how it ties to what my teacher's expectations are. Next, I can also, in opposing viewpoints, just type in my topic or something I want to know more about. So if I start typing in artificial, again, I see those ones that I saw on that list. And I think I'm leaning more toward the way that artificial intelligence impacts mental health. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And it's going to take me to this page where, again, we have those related topics. So artificial intelligence, med tech, mental disorders, mental health, tech and society. Going down, we have all of these options in terms of sources. But one of the things I really like, and this is, again, with every single topic, is looking at this read overview. This is the area that you will be looking at to determine whether or not you want to invest your hard-earned time on this any further, because you are going to have to find a topic that speaks to you in one way or the other. And it's something that is compelling, something that's enjoyable, something you have questions about, something that bothers you. All of those are good reasons to choose a topic within your teacher's parameters. And so if I was looking at this artificial intelligence and mental health, and then I went underneath article contents, I would see three different things that are covered in this article. We have the technological models. So this tells me what type of artificial intelligence does what. I know a little bit about it, but I don't know everything. And that might be the boat you're in when you get started on this research. Next is documented and potential benefits. So in this article, it promises to show us some of the good things about AI and show us how it's helping us as a society, showing us how to save time, showing us all these, these arguably miraculous things that are happening technologically. They're going to show you some of the good things. And then they're going to show you the risks and limitations. And the risks and limitations are the side of the story where they are talking about things that you should be cautious about, maybe some of the negative sides of it. And since we're talking about mental health, that might also be something where they're talking about how it's being used both in the positive and in negative ways. And so you could click on this at any point, and it's going to just take you to the place in the document where that lives. Now, next, we have some related subjects. Related subjects are always so helpful because, again, you might start off by thinking that you want to talk about artificial intelligence and mental health, but maybe you find some piece in your research that makes you want to do something completely different. And so if we're looking at something completely different, that's okay. It's just going to help you. Research never has a definitive way of doing things. It does make sense that you kind of leapfrog all over the place. So these are words that you might want to check out later or use as in a keyword search. And then this also has some other articles, aka sources that you might use. And so all of these things are here, and all of these things can be found just in that read overview. Now, once we're in this read overview, there's also some things I want to point out in terms of educational technology tools. One thing I like is this translation button. We also can make these smaller, the font. We can make it super big if we want. We can change the font. So say we want to look at it in the Open Dyslexic. This is very helpful as many people struggle with different versions of dyslexia. And this Open Dyslexic font, hold it tight to a line so it stays, it's not swimming all over the screen. You can also add color in the back if that will help you. You can change the line spacing. That's also something that you can do. But every time you do this, what's nice is that it will carry over to the next page as you're doing your research. So I always like that component of it. You next could listen to it. So you see this audio sound. This audio sound is going to allow you to listen while you read. You could also listen to it instead of read, or in like different stages. Read it, then listen to it. Read it, then listen to it, or do it at the same time. A lot of times when you are reading something new, especially academic or technical, you need to hear it in a few different ways so it sticks, so you remember it. And reading and hearing at the same time can reinforce that. So that's something to consider. Another set of tech tools we like can be found here. You can find your citation button. So if you click here, you can always save it to or export it to your Google Drive or your OneDrive. You can also get the MLA or the APA versions of the source that you want. You can send this, again here, Google Drive, OneDrive, or email. You can download this to your personal device. You can get a permanent link, which will allow you to work around the paywalls that oftentimes surround academic databases. And then you can highlight and annotate the document as you go along. So this is all very nice. And this can be found with any topic that you find. And also, this is a good place to start if you are considering, what else is out there. Because I always encourage people to make sure that they're looking for these different tools, because it should help your educational experience run a little bit more smoothly because you need to be able to cite all work that comes from a place that's not your own brain. And then you also have to have a saving method, which is very important. You also need to make sure that you understand your own system and understand that the tools are working for you. And I do want this to, again, because it enriches it, I think that this would be helpful. And so once you've looked at this and you've decided that this is going to be your topic, the next step, just going back a little bit, is to look at what's below. We already looked at these related topics. And so these are all different source options. So we can see we have 31 academic journals. Why is this important? Well, it's important because a lot of times a teacher will ask their student to find certain types of sources during research. And so those sources, sometimes they say, I want all of them to be peer reviewed, or I want 2 of them to be from an academic journal, or I want this to be academic. Whatever it is, when they use that wording, what they're talking about are the articles, and I'll go ahead and click this. What they're talking about is they're talking about a standard that they hold up pretty high. And when I say that it's a high standard, what I'm saying is when a high standard of something is something that you can trust. And in this era of potential fakery, when it comes to research or looking at anything in terms of any type of media, knowing whether or not something's trustworthy, looking at the news, looking at creative pieces of work, a lot of sectors have been impacted by the ability that people and robots have to not be real. And so when we're looking for sources that we can trust, one of the things you can do is click on academic journals or peer reviewed, and that will ensure that you know what you are looking at. You can trust it and it makes sense. And so we have peer reviewed for every single one of these 31 hits. And you should be able to look at this and know that the research is sound. Next, we have references. We have 21 references. We have all types of articles that are news. But any of these could potentially be sources, and these are things that you could find in opposing viewpoints. So when we're in opposing viewpoints, just realize that there are all types of pieces of information that could just get you started on this process. At the very least, it's going to provide you with some background information, and at the most, you could actually end up getting some sources alongside a rich background that's been provided for you. So when we're here, we have this opposing viewpoints, which once again can be found on A to Z resources. And once you're here, this is when we take it to that next step. How is technology changing us? Well, a smaller subtopic, or one that you're going to focus on, is artificial intelligence and mental health. At least I am for this demo. Okay, so once you have narrowed down your topic, the next thing that you're doing is you are going to start peppering it with questions. So, what are all the things you want to know about your topic? What are all the questions you have? What are some issues that you feel kind of make or break this subject matter? And so, if we were talking about AI and mental illness, there would be quite a few things that I would want to know. But one question that I might want to look at is this first one. Does addiction to AI technologies make problems like social isolation, detachment from reality, or poor face-to-face communication worse? Okay, so what I'm doing with this question is I'm wondering how AI impacts the individuals who might already have some mental illness tied to how much they are connecting with the world, or as much as they're part of the world, with the detachment from reality, the social isolation, the poor communication, etc. The next option I have here, or the question I'm asking, is what is the relationship between AI addiction and loneliness, particularly in youth? So in this case, I want to look at the side of mental illness that is tied to loneliness, and that side of being apart, being with or isolating oneself. And in this case, I also want to look at a specific group of people, which is the youth or young people. And then finally, I have this question of how does AI, or how do AI related addictive behaviors like social media, gaming, or binge watching affect mental health in teens compared to adults? Okay, so in this case, I'm looking at addictive behaviors, not different types of mental illness, but addictive behaviors, and I'm comparing it between teens, or comparing it to the behavior of it from between teens and adults. So these are questions I'm asking. These are questions I'm asking. These are questions that intrigue me about this topic of AI and mental illness. So once I write down a number of questions, and this can come out through an afternoon study, like brainstorming session, or when I'm like kind of revisiting over a series of days. But once I have created all these questions, the next thing that I'm doing is I'm going to choose this research question, or I'm going to finally focus in on what I really, really, really want to make sure I know about this topic. And so I've decided that I am going to look at the relationship between AI addiction and loneliness, particularly in youth. This is what I want to know. This is the question. Now, once I have created this question, it actually helps me tumble into a part of the paper that is so important. It basically establishes the roadmap for the entire piece of work. And so once you have asked this question, like in my case, what is the relationship between AI addiction and loneliness, particularly in youth? Then the next step is to answer it. And this answer can always change. The thesis answer is always manipulated. It can be manipulated once as you get further along in your research. So if I'm asking about the relationship between AI addiction and loneliness, well, then my question is, or my answer is that AI addiction negatively impacts youth mental health by fostering social isolation and weakening face-to-face communication skills. That is my answer. And that thesis is going to be in that very first paragraph. And that thesis is going to drive everything that happens in the rest of the paper. So if you want to look at this in terms of like an inverted triangle, where it starts is this. How is technology changing us? This is the topic that our teacher gave us. Next, you have chosen within this big topic something you want to focus on. And what I'm going to be focusing on in this demo is artificial intelligence and mental health. Next, I'm going to ask a bunch of questions about this new topic that I'm learning. So what is the relationship between AI addiction and loneliness, particularly in youth? So that's my question. And then finally, I'm going to develop a thesis that's tied to that question, where AI addiction negatively impacts youth mental health by fostering social isolation and weakening face-to-face communication skills. That's my thesis. Now, when we're talking about our thesis, that is so important. And while I said that it can definitely change, let me just explain to you what it does for you as long as you're sticking to that general topic. You know, your wording might change, your ideas might change, but having a thesis in, you know, at least even a working thesis provides you with the start of what is necessary for a keyword search. A keyword search is something you type into the computer in search boxes, as opposed to clicking all over the screen like we did with opposing viewpoints. So if my thesis is AI addiction negatively impacts youth mental health by fostering social isolation and weakening face-to-face communication skills, if that's my topic, then, or my thesis, then the next thing I need to do is I need to make some keywords. And I can do this with a sticky note. I can type them up. I can look them up in thesaurus, in my thesaurus. I can look this up by, you know, different subject terms that I'll be pointing out while we're researching. But I'll just show you a little bit about how this works. So if we were looking for different ways to say AI addiction, you might consider this. Sometimes people write AI with periods and without them. Sometimes they always write it completely out, just writing out artificial intelligence as opposed to saying AI. Next, sometimes it's helpful to be looking at a specific product. So you might be looking at something like ChatGPT. I could also type in Elon Musk if I wanted to. I could look up maybe a company that uses this. So we have a type of ChatGPT. We have a big tech name in this. We have a company that might use it. There's all kinds of words or proper nouns that you could put in here to be very specific. And then we have AI addiction without quotes and one with quotes. Why does this matter? It matters because the computer is looking for a match. And so when we have AI addiction with no quotes, basically you're saying to the computer, I want AI, I want addiction, but it doesn't have to be AI addiction together. It just has to say AI somewhere and addiction somewhere. That's it. As opposed to AI addiction in quotes, which is when you are telling the computer that you are looking for AI addiction in that order and together. So that's something to note. We do the same thing with mental health, and we do the same thing with youth. So there's all kinds of things that we can do. I tend to spend a little bit of time on this because I know that it's never going to be wasted. Finally, we start thinking about how to do a search. And so what I'm going to be doing for the most part, for the majority of the rest of this demonstration, is I'm going to show you how to take words from over here and then to combine them in different types of ways in our searching, in our in our search engines to find the sources and articles that we need for our research paper. And so we'll be looking at this in terms of two concepts, so two words or two sets of words. Then we'll be looking at other words, but applying different filters that will definitely make a difference in the search. We can search in multidisciplinary databases, so meaning some databases that are more generalized. And then we can search in subject-specific databases, so ones that are specifically made for, for certain topics and certain concerns. So let's go ahead and pop into the library. So we've already familiarized ourselves with how to get here. And we've also talked about what you can expect to find when you're at the Indianapolis Library site. And so there are two places to search. And I mentioned that we're going to be starting with two concepts. And we could do that in a number of places. We could do it at Start with Discover, or we could get into individualized databases. I always like to show people where to look at it in Start with Discover, because Start with Discover allows us to look at more than one database. In fact, it's going to search nearly everything that we have listed here with the 134 databases, with the exception of the red asterisks. So all of the other ones will be searched if you are looking or if you're going through Start with Discover. And so we'll talk about the benefits of going in through here versus a specific database. But let's go ahead and start with one with AI addiction and mental health. So I've typed in these words. This is my keyword searching. I'm doing it in Start with Discover, and then I'm going to click search. All right. So in this first search, we have 52,721. Under every circumstance, this will always be way too many. Now, I do like the fact that we got a hit and we got many hits and that the computer is finding things for us. But in research, it's not about finding the most. It's about finding the best. And when you're finding the best, one of the ways to do that is you have to slough through, you have to go through a lot of different types of examples of documents, of articles, of sources to find what you actually want. So I always encourage people to apply this filter, especially if your teacher has already said to you that a peer-reviewed journal is the ideal, or they say you need to find something that has been peer-reviewed, or you need something that's academic. They'll say all kinds of things when they're talking to students, just to be clear that you're looking for the same kind of thing, a reliable source. So if we click under limiters at peer-reviewed, that takes our 52,000 down to 33,000, which is remarkable considering that ends up getting rid of nearly 20,000 different options that just were not peer reviewed. They weren't bad necessarily. They wouldn't be bad if they're on our website, but they just may not be what you want or what your teacher wants. So by applying this peer reviewed, all the other ones went away. Another thing to put in here is a publication date. So the publication date here, we could type in 2021, and then we can type in 2026. When we type in 2026, then include, what we're saying to the computer is that we want the most up-to-date information that the computer has available to it. And so we started off with that 32. The 52, then we went down to 33. And then by putting in those years, we ended up with 17,000. That is so much better than where we started. Now, once we're here, this is where we start looking at our options. And so what are you looking for? What are the options? What are your sources? Well, potentially all of these could be sources. Every green piece of wording is a link to a source. Now, when we're here, there's certain information. They have like the impact of Instagram on mental health and well-being of Indian youth. Okay, so In this case, I'm seeing that they're specifically looking at Instagram. Is that important to you? Do you intend on looking at different types a of a product or of a of technology? That could be important. Are you focusing specifically on Instagram? If that's the case, this might be a good article for you. This is also looking at Indian youth. So another question, are you looking at how this impacts people from all over the world? Are you interested in a specific part of the world, or are you looking at something that's maybe more local, or maybe something that is happening here in the United States? That could be something that may or may not play into whether or not you want to choose the source. And really, depending on your answer, that I would be able to help you with that. You know, a lot of times when you talk to a librarian during a library research presentation, or when you're doing tutoring, we're asking you ultimately what you want so we can get exactly what you need so we get you what you need, and not just a bunch of sources for the sake of having sources. So once you kind of go through that mental checklist of what you want, you then scroll down and you're reading these. So we have this, we're talking about another type of social media addiction. We have this is written in a language, in a language besides besides English. Then we have this special section, information technology to improve mental health. We're just scrolling through. Okay, so say this looked like something I wanted. This digital mental health tools and AI therapy chatbots, a balanced approach to regulation. Okay, if this is something that I wanted, then there's a couple ways that I could look at this. I could go straight into check for full text. I could also click into this link. Ultimately, we're going to get there no matter what. But when I click on this article itself, or at least I click on the title, what I see is a couple different things that I know will be useful. I have the title once again. I have the authors fully up on top. We can see that this was published in at least the last year. I know this is an academic journal, so this verifies that I'm looking at something that's been peer reviewed and has been scrutinized by other experts in the field. Therefore, we can trust it. And then I have this abstract. An abstract tends to be a very short summary of what to anticipate in the longer article, as well as providing an explanation for the research process that is very important to many people when they're looking for support. And so if this passes, if this looks good to you, if you click on this check for full text, it's going to take you to the area that you can access your article. And so here we go. Here we have our digital mental health tools and AI therapy chatbots. And so if we wanted to look at the article here, what we could do is we could click on this down arrow, and I'd see a PDF or an online full text. If I click on PDF, then it's going to look like this. We can see it's 16 pages long. We have page numbers. You can see there's some columns here. There's some color here. There's so much to be analyzing. Next, we have some ed tech tools that I believe will be important to enrich your experience. You could click on this quote mark, the citation, and then you can find the citation for APA as well as MLA, and then you could copy and paste that for your references page or works cited. You can also go to this little swoop of an arrow where you can create a link for this article. You can also download this article to your personal device, and then you can also listen to it. If you click on this listen button, you can speed it up to 2 times, and you can download the MP3. You can manipulate the volume, all of those things, just as if you were listening to anything audio. It can be a very nice feature. Now, if you instead end up clicking the online full text instead of the PDF that I just demoed, You're going to get the same words. You're going to get the same setup in terms of at least a title at the top and then moving forward and knowing the citation information or some of it. But as you scroll through this, you can see it's lacking color and some of the details that we saw in the PDF. It also has things that you should start to anticipate as we go through academic databases. We have this quote mark once again, so this is where you can find your references. We have this swoop that will allow us this swoop will allow us to go through and actually save our work once again, as I demoed. And then the difference between the online full text and the PDF is that if I click on this little globe, this will allow me to translate the text into something that might be better understood by me. And so you can see how fast this changes from English to Spanish. It just took a few moments. And there are dozens of languages listed here. The one thing I do like to point out is that when we have this globe and you're listening or you're watching it or reading it in a translated language, you cannot listen to it. Okay. And so you want to make sure that if you do change it to a different language, that you are not trying to also listen to it because the software will prohibit it. But those are the two ways that you can find the article that you've chosen when you're doing that search through all your results in Start with Discover. Now, a couple other things I want to point out, which I feel is a very exciting thing about research, are these two tabs, the references and cited by 8. The references tab is good because this shows where the authors, these people here, where they went to get their information when they were writing their paper and conducting their research. They saw these articles as potentially they helped them to come to their conclusions. And so these references could potentially be sources for you if they make sense with your argument and your thesis. You could also look at this cited by 8. Now, one of the things I want to point out is that this was released less than a year ago, just about a year ago exactly. And so what's happened since then is 8 different researchers have referred to this article up here. And this article, they've used this article in their research, 8 people in the last year, and they've published it. So if you wanted to look at maybe the ways that your article, your source has inspired others, that could be a good thing for you because then you could, use that potentially as a source and instead of getting one source, getting more than one source. So do think about that in terms of all the things that you see here. Now, we looked at this, as you see, as when we typed in the words AI addiction and mental health. But there are different things that we can do to think about this research process. And I mentioned that, or if I haven't mentioned, everything you do when you are typing, everything you're doing when you are doing the research, one misspelling, one extra space, a quote versus not a quote, using AI versus artificial intelligence. When you choose different things in your research, you are going to get different results. And so in this case, we have AI addiction and mental health, and we got nearly 55,000 results. But in this case, we have AI addiction and mental health. But in this case, I'm actually putting quote marks around AI addiction and mental health. What this is doing is this is going to control the computer by saying, instead of looking at AI, addiction, mental, and health as different words it's trying to match, It's actually instead going to be looking for AI addiction together in that order. Same thing with mental health. Mental health in this order together as it's doing its search. So when I type it this way and I click search, what I end up getting is 187 results, which is wonderful. 187 results after looking at 53,000. This is really a better place and really where we want to be. Now, I could add all types of filters. Again, I could put in this publication date if I wanted to. I could add this peer reviewed if I wanted to. I could also go into the other source types. You know, your teachers may not want you to only have peer reviewed. They might say, hey, I just want one peer reviewed, but the other four have to be different. That happens sometimes. So if that does happen sometimes, you might want to look at these source types as they provide excellent filters when you're looking through your work or you're looking at your options. So we have 181 academic journals, not a surprise. We have a couple magazines, we have a couple news, and one literature review. If I click on news, I get 2 results, which I know is shocking after the initial search of getting 53,000 without the quotes. But again, with savvy quote marks, with savvy punctuation and filters, you can really change your experience. And in this case, we have 2 compelling articles. Shocking majority of Gen Zers would marry AI, think it could replace human connection. Another article is AI is changing relationships, an in-depth look. Again, sounds pretty good. So these are things I might be able to use, but again, it's not peer reviewed, it's news. So make sure you know what your teacher wants in terms of types of sources, because this could change things. Another place that I would go to manipulate the filters is underneath subject. We have substance abuse here. Maybe that's something that we want to know more about. Maybe, let's see, a view all. Maybe we want to look at therapy, you know, different ways of treating it. The reason why this is important is that these subject tags work the same way that your tags do when you're in social media. These allow your sources to be more findable. And so these are oftentimes added by an author or by a publisher, so they can make sure that people who are looking for the articles can find them and read them and do something with this information. And so as you can see, once again, we have this 181 academic journals that contain these articles. Well, if you wanted to get closer to it and see a few less, you know, instead of having to filter through or scroll through all your options, you could always just click on something here, and then that will give you less options. You can look, instead of looking at 180, you're looking at something that's more of like the 20s or something that they promise there. So we really like those, and that's something you should definitely consider when you are doing your research. Now, once you have looked at everything you can and start with Discover, if that's where you choose to start, the next step is to go to Academic Search Complete, which is underneath A to Z Resources. We click in here. The very first option is Academic Search Complete. We like this because this is a multidisciplinary database. And a multidisciplinary database, this means that it covers a variety of topics. So whether you're doing research for engineering, an English class, a graphic design, if you want to know more about history, I mean, we have education. We have different types of databases that are specialized for that. But then we have ones that touch on all those topics that might be found in those specialized databases. And Academic Search Complete is certainly one of our favorites. So if I click into this, this does look different compared to start with Discover. And in this case, it also allows for predictive text, which I like. So if I started typing in artificial intelligence, You can see I get all these different other words, very much like what you see in Google. So I'm going to go ahead and click this artificial intelligence or AI with periods. Next, I'm going to type in mental health. And then I'm going to type in youth or adolescents or young people or teens or young people, all the things, all the words. Another thing I'm doing is I am bringing this together with something called a Boolean operator. Boolean operators are and or not. And is telling the computer that you want all the words and they all have to be included in the article. And so these could show up in the contents of the article. It could show up in the title. It could show up in the subjects. There's all kinds of places it could use. It could go unless you are looking for it in a specific place. But and specifically means both. We want all the words. Next is or. Or works, we still want those words, but they don't have to be in the same article. You could have one that says youth, one that says adolescence, one that has mental health and youth. And all these combinations are possible when you use or. It does also ensure that you're going to have more options because basically you're making these little piles of information all over the place. And so you tend to get a lot of options when you say or. So because anything works as long as it shows up. Or I mean, I guess in terms of it doesn't have to be together as long as it shows up, period. And then finally, we have not. Not is a powerful operator because it will essentially not look for anything that you have typed once you say not. You might recall that we were one of the options we considered during our keyword or during our research question option or stage was to decide how AI was impacting youth versus adults. So a lot of times when people are looking at different groups to compare, if you use not, and I used it in this, essentially what I'd be saying is I don't want any articles that address how AI manipulates or impacts young people. They'd be looking for all the other words except for that. Okay, they'd be avoiding it. And so a lot of times if you do nothing, it's going to default to and unless you really want to change the research process, that's when you start changing the Boolean operators. But just so you know, that is always an option for you. Once you've done that, the next thing is to limit your results. So put in, peer reviewed if that's what your teacher wants. We'll do it for this demo. You can see these other options for publication dates. Let's say past 5 years. That is fine. That's usually what your teacher wants. But again, I've worked with teachers who like it tighter, like 2 or 3 years. That's not the norm, but I have heard that. And I've also had teachers who do want something that's more historical or like a big sweep of information. And so some of that could be, we don't necessarily have to stay at 5 years. But for the most part, especially with English 111, especially when we're talking about technology or any of the sciences, anything political, these things change very quickly. And so we have the full text, peer reviewed, past 5 years. These are all the words we're looking for. And now I click search. One database, one multidisciplinary database, and I have 231. Okay, so that to me is pretty cool. Being able to take a big topic and add all these different parameters or rules to it and then getting some healthy results. And so we have here like some of our options. Again, we're going to be reading the title. We're going to be clicking on this show more so we can see the abstract. We're going to see some keywords or some subjects. Now, these subjects can later be used as keyword searching. There's no reason not to, so you can consider that. We have this access now. So this should look familiar to you here, this PDF online full text. This one was cited by 3, 2, 11, 40. Oh, wow. So if that was the case, maybe we should look at this more closely because it's cited by 40. So if I wanted to look at this and access now, This should all look very familiar to you. We have the same EdTech tools here. We are scrolling through here. This is a PDF, so it has some page numbers. Definitely look, we have some columns. We have some variety in our fonts. Again, I hope that what you're seeing are some patterns here that can help you. We can listen to it if we want because it's the PDF version. So all of these things are here, and all of these things are here that you might consider. But yes, but this is an excellent way of looking through one database for sources. And then finally, we can search through subject-specific databases. And when I click on A to Z resources, subject-specific databases can be found by looking at the subjects, and you can narrow down and filter by the subject-specific information that you're looking for. When we're talking about technology, there are a couple of places I would consider. Definitely information technology. I might look at science and applied science. I might I might be looking at education. AI, it has definitely impacted our world a lot here at school for many reasons. But whatever you choose, we'll go ahead and choose this science and applied science filter databases. We find 10. We have 10 different databases that fall under this filter, as opposed to over the 130 that we saw. I scroll down, applied science and text source, green file. Let's see what we have here. So we could look at any of these. So say we looked at this applied science and text source. And here what I want to type in again is artificial intelligence. I want to look at mental health. And then we'll say youth. We'll go with the exact same one we looked at, except with our except we were looking at a multi-purpose database. So once I click here, again, I can add any of the filters that I want. When I click search, we get 70. So think about these numbers, 52, 53,000, going down to 187, just with some punctuation changes. Then we get into the types of databases that aren't so large. So we have one that is multidisciplinary. We get about 200 results. We use the same wording, different filters in a different subject-specific database, and now we have 70. So we're scrolling down. Hopefully all of this is starting to look very familiar to you. Hopefully you're thinking about what you're looking for specifically. All right. And so once you do that, you are, you can see once again, when you're looking at this, the options that you have, and you can click right into this as we've demonstrated before, and you can find your information. So all those things said, going back to the library site, there are many different ways that you can approach this. I always think that if you're in the brainstorming phase, you should go to opposing viewpoints first, just so you can get those juices flowing. I like going to start with Discover when I need a lot of results, especially when I'm looking at something that is brand new to me, or I'm unsure if I'm going to get a lot of hits, given how specific my thoughts are about the topic. But for a lot of people, I do think it's fine to start with Academic Search Complete. You'll have fewer results, but if you apply the appropriate filters, then you'll be working with less. So I think you'll be able to see some of the good ones bubble up to the top, and that will help you with research in general. So going back to this and thinking about what we know, once we have gone through that process and we went through 4 different ones, 2 concepts, similar with filters, multidisciplinary, and subject specific, what's next is to gather your research, your sources, and start to take notes. And at any point during this process, you're always welcome to talk to a librarian. We can always help you with those sources. And then once you've been able to read through those, your next step then is to go to, I would say, go to a writing tutor. And a writing tutor will be able to help you along the way and maybe help you to say what you want to and tie it all back to your thesis and those thoughts that you were having when you were first presented with the topic. So, as a reminder, your learning objectives today were the following. First, find information from appropriate sources. So, you know now where to look for information within the Ivy Tech Library, Indianapolis Library database or site. Then you're going to find databases on the library site that are good for you. Remember, there's a lot of different on-ramps and a lot of different databases that will work better for you depending on your topic. So I would play around with it. Let a librarian know if you need some assistance. It's very common for people to ask about databases that will be helpful. So I encourage you to do that. And then next, we talked about those keywords and how important they are when you're typing them in, as well as those filters and the punctuation that can make all the difference when you are doing, when you're looking for new things. So I do encourage everybody to take advantage of the support that you have here at Ivy Tech. As a reminder, you do have free tutoring that is an option for you. And we also have this library site here. So if you don't want to go through My Ivy, you're welcome just to scan this QR code and take it from there. So thank you once again for being here. And we're going to go ahead and end it today. Thank you.